Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. J'espère que vous avez profité de la station ce matin. I hope you all enjoyed this morning's earliest part of the programming. Welcome to downtown Ottawa. I'm grateful to be joining you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe First Nation, who were the first people to walk the lands on which our nation's capital is located today. First off, a huge thank you for joining us to this session, Getting Your Culture Fit, How to Build a Culture That Can Drive Government Transformation. My name is Tom Dufour. I'm a Director General at Statistics Canada, responsible for strategic data management. Culture and values are very dear to my heart, and this is why I'm really excited to hear from our panelists of experts today. And what a panel it is. We have some international experts along with some that are a little bit closer to home. We do not have the benefit of simultaneous translation in this room. Nous n'avons pas la traduction dans cette salle. But if you have questions in French, I can help translate, or some of our panelists can answer that. Alors n'hésitez pas. Si vous avez des questions en français, je tenterai d'assister aux besoins. Look, we only have 45 minutes, and I suspect that our audience will embrace the chance to ask some questions. For those who are in the other room, we're going to follow a little bit of a similar format. I'm going to ask our panelists a few questions, but we'll also be sure to take your questions from the room. So let me introduce today's panelists who will share their insights on building a culture that can drive government transformation. In the interest of time, I won't delve into their biographies, but I encourage you to have a look on the Accelerate Gov website. So we'll go in order. Sitting next to me, Alex Binet is Associate Deputy Minister with Public Services and Procurement Canada. Erica Wren currently serves as the Chief Data Officer at Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Alexandra Masse is Head of the Department of New Work, Change Management, and Project Management at Germany's Federal Ministry for Digital and Transport. And Dr. Amina Zawidi is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance of Uganda. And Philip Bland is a Global Government Advisor for Qualtrics. So we begin today's session with the premise that transforming government requires developing an innovative culture that encourages public servants to take calculated risks to deliver better services. But civil service cultures around the world are often risk-averse, and public servants are not incentivized to try new ways of delivering services. So I'm going to ask each and one of you to just take a moment and tell us to what extent you think your organization or your department facilitates an innovative and risk-taking culture, and do people feel empowered to try new things? So maybe I'll start with you, Alex.
Great. Before I start, can I just find out, if you're from Ottawa, can you just put your hand up? Okay, thank you. I just needed to know who I was talking to. And so some of you will relate to what I have to say next, hopefully. Listen, I'm going to talk on government of Canada-wide. I think that there is an appetite from people to do the job different. I really do think that. I feel that. I know that. We put out a poster to come and help fix our pay issues. We had 4,600 people apply at various levels, in 48 hours. So I know there's an appetite. I would say there's two things that stand in the way, though, in this town and in this country from a federal perspective. The leadership of it at the civil service level and our processes. Who here has submitted a Treasury Board submission? Put your hand up, please. Is it an enjoyable process for you? Have you been lucky enough to have to submit something to budget? Can you please put your hand up? It's okay, we've all done it. Okay, so also not always the most enjoyable process. So what we're trying to do is fit a square peg in a round hole with this innovation word, because if it takes you 1,000 pages to submit your approvals and your checks and balances, and it takes you years to get your money, are you going to be feeling like you're in a place where you feel empowered to fail on that investment? It's just normal. You're not. The answer is you're not. It takes you too long. It is easier to ask for $1 billion than for 50 million, right? And it's going to take you a heck of a long time to go through central agency process. So I think we have, since we love process so much, if we're going to be serious about innovation, we have to talk about central agencies. We have to talk about funding it smaller, to start it smaller, so you can fail faster. Yes, it's a cliche. But the way we govern ourselves right now does not permit it, does not match the appetite that I see from the civil service to want to do things differently. And we have a whole bunch of good reasons. Nobody likes going to committees. Nobody likes to have an audit that says they did something wrong. We live in a compliance culture as opposed to an empowerment culture. So I really, and that's not going to go away, guys. We live, it's the system we live with. But can we help ourselves a little bit with how we plan, how we budget, how we execute? So that's thing one. The second thing I would say is on leadership. I don't think we have enough operational leaders in the civil service. I think we have a lot of policy and a lot of communications leaders, but not a lot of operational level leaders, right? So where you have to make a call. So to me, like, those are areas where I think if we're able to kind of match some changes in the process governance and in the leadership space to match the appetite that I know is out there in the civil service to actually innovate, I think great things can happen. But I guess I'm up here and I'm a little bit tired of like the agile gaslighting that goes on in this town, where I keep hearing that we do these things in an agile way, yet it still takes us 2 years and we don't iterate it, and we're afraid of these things. So maybe it comes from a bit of place of frustration, and I should have asked who was a policy person in the room first. I apologize also for that. But I'm assuming we're all good here in this room. So to me, like, those are the two things I would take away. Appetite is there, some substantial changes in how we do central agency management and from a leadership perspective.
Thank you, Alex. That's excellent. Maybe we'll get a bit of an international flavor. Alexandra, can you tell us a little bit about, in Germany, this whole notion about facilitating innovation and risk-taking culture?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult topic in Germany, because administration for years has been very traditional. We are really risk averse. We are bound to regulation, to laws, and so on. And but in the last years, we really have seen that we cannot answer the questions of today and of the future with the working traditions of the past. And that is at the moment a really important topic. That is also the reason my department was established with new work and change management in the headline. And I see that the culture in our ministry, but also in the other ministries, the other federal ministries, is changing a little bit. We have still this traditional culture that people who work there want to avoid risks, that the leaders we have does not encourage people to make their own decisions, to take risks and so on. But we also feel the need to work in projects, the need to work not faster, but more efficient, to be more innovative. And we are now at this point of change, of transformation. And I see it when I speak, or I feel it when I speak with people, that there is a lot of them, they want to change, they want to do more, but there is a lot of uncertainty how. And I think that is the important point, to not only to encourage, but also to enable staff in administration to work different. Because we have a lot of processes that are, for years we have them, and all, yeah, there are a lot of people who know what to do, which steps to do, and all these steps are very, take a long time, but it's well known. And to change this takes time. You have to encourage people to try other approaches and not to be frustrated when they fail in the first step. And you also have to encourage the leaders to, to let people try something and to fail, to learn from their mistakes, to speak about mistakes. And also it's very important to, I think it's very important to differentiate between in what area you can take risks and in what not. And you have to learn this, and we have to teach our staff how to learn this. What is a risk? What risk can I take? In what area? What decisions are on what level possible? And so at the moment, I think we are quite traditional in our bureaucracy, but there is a change, and there are a lot of motivation to change. And yeah, so I'm very positive at the moment.
The motivation and other things, I see parallels with what is going on in Canada as well. Amina, we had a chance to exchange a little bit before the session, and we talked a little bit about how some of these issues around culture seem to be similar. Can you share a little bit from your perspective in Uganda?
Thank you very much. First of all, maybe I should declare that I'm surprised that the first world is facing these challenges. Words like innovation, agile, came from the first world, but when you say you're facing these challenges, I get a bit surprised. In Uganda is one of the third world countries. We have actually embraced innovation, although it's still a little slow in terms of investment. Yes, we do know and acknowledge the fact that ICT and digital transformation is the way to go, and it is one of our priorities. But that doesn't speak to the investment that goes into that area. When it comes to innovation, under the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, it's quite a mouthful, but intentional, because ICT is we lead the digital transformation agenda, but under national guidance, we look at issues like mindset change. For you to transform digitally and accelerate digital transformation, you have to change the culture and the mindset and the way people think, and our ministry is doing that as well. As we do digital transformation, we also communicate and educate the people. One of the unique things we have as a country is that we have one of the youngest populations in the world. We have 45 million people, and over 30 million plus are below the age of 30 years old. So the group of 30 years old and below, our average age is 15, 16 years old. As you're thinking about the transformation, you also have to educate people to appreciate and uptake technology. So under government, we have an innovation fund that we are leveraging on to utilize the capacity of the young people to develop systems for government consumption. One of the systems we have developed is an e-procurement system. We have digitized procurement using the minds of and capacity of Ugandans. We have also developed another system for one of our programs that is aimed to transform people from a subsistence economy to commercial economy, leveraging on that system that we are building. So in a way, we are encouraging the young people to build systems for us, but also in government, we are encouraging people to work collaboratively in partnership, to be able to share data and resources, and also to digitize uniformly, because e-procurement is cross-cutting. So if we're using an e-procurement system, every ministry, department, and agency is going to use this system, and we shall digitize together. But yes, we still have largely a challenge of the whole of government approach. People are working in silos, duplicating development support as well. So we are working on those largely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amina. Thank you very much. So Erica, IRCC, very active in the data world. Again, sort of along the same lines, the role of culture and how do we get to that risk-taking culture, and how do we empower the people?
So I think at IRCC, like most of the government organizations, our appetite for, I would say, risk is not necessarily high. And this is, I think it's fundamentally because our appetite for failure or, big failures are quite low. Understandably, if we go out and change our entire immigration system, we're not going to do something so drastic that's going to put the entire visa issuing system, for example, at risk, stopping so many people relying on our services to come into Canada. But we often put a lot of emphasis on risk elimination and not necessarily on risk management. And I think we also realize that we live in a digital disruption kind of era. By the time that you've taken, I think Alex talked about processes a little bit, that we go through the 2 years of gating, the 2 years of procurement, the 3 years of policy development, the world around us has already been changed 5 or 6 or 7 times. You don't keep up, you can't keep up. So that's why I think there's a few things IRCC is doing right, and there's a couple things we have room for improvement as well. The first thing I'll say we've been doing right is we really have quite a data and evidence-driven culture, and that's really stemming from the support and sponsorship of our very senior executives. So what that means is when you're in an environment that you're trying to make large-scale innovations or disruptive changes like we're going right now under digital platform transformation, we wanted to know what is the worst case that can happen, what is the best case that can happen, what is the likelihood of somewhere in between. You need data to do that. So we've implemented, for example, a data impact assessment. We think what are some of the metrics we need a year, 2 years down the road, and we work today to get that data into our systems to sort of situate, engage people's comfort on, are you okay with this level of risk? Because when people, risks are sometimes viewed by fear, when they see the information, the data, evidence in front of them, it comforts them, it makes them a little bit more braver perhaps in terms of taking that risk. The second thing that I think we are doing right, it's not done, but I think we need to consistently tweak our governance mechanisms to really match the speed of digital transformation and disruption. Like I said, we're not in the world of taking 8 years to write, requirements and et cetera, where Ubers and Airbnbs are changing the lives around us. By the time you have a perfectly developed guidance or policy document, BART is out, Gemini is out, ChatGPT is out, you cannot keep up. So in that retrospect, I really think we're doing quite well, starting to do quite well in terms of integrating those iterative changes and agile process management as opposed to using that kind of industrial stage kind of like a Big Bang approach to make sure everything is perfect and every single risk is eliminated. And the third thing that I think we need to do better is be more open and transparent. We often put our good stories out there. I don't think we do enough in terms of putting our failures out there. When people see that what you've done in terms of contributing to a failure or success, they can give you feedback. We don't have to pretend we're the best in everything. In fact, the most innovations are happening outside of the government of Canada, right? So I think we need to put ourselves out there to be open to the critique because, first, it builds that kind of public trust and credibility. And second, there's so much we can learn as public servants from what others can give us. We can just take away that layer of fear of failure.
So many great points that you brought up there, and I love the one about transparency. We talk a lot. So, Philip, we often talk about the partnerships and everything else like that, but please, from your perspective, I know you're here sort of representing the private sector, but you have public sector experience as well. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And happy to share. I'll put on 2 hats. I think, I've been very fortunate. I get to work quite a lot around the world with a number of different governments, and I spent my time, if you can't tell from the accent, in Australian government. And, to Alex's point earlier, I think leadership's a core thing, and I'll share a couple of experiences that were quite lived. One is we talk about fail fast, but we don't define fail very well. And what ends up happening is it becomes a cultural statement without kind of an example of what it really means to do it well, which creates more anxiety and fear for those people who want to lead out and innovate and take those risks. In fact, I was at NATO 3 weeks ago where somebody just was quite honest and brave and said, we've got to stop lying to ourselves. We go to conferences and we talk about agile and we talk about doing all these things, and then we go back to our organizations and we get really frustrated that we can't get through the bureaucracy or we can't deliver it that way. And I'm going to share kind of 3 things that I've had the pleasure around the world to take away from where it's been done well. And the first one is leadership. And from my time in government, I'll never forget, we had a third-term party re-elected, and we had a new minister. And that was the first minister for digital and customer service to ever exist in our country, and that was at a state level. About 8 weeks into his role as minister, I get an email at 8 p.m. at night asking me to go and demo 2 prototypes to the minister the next day. Never happened before in my career. And that was a bit terrifying, and you walk in and you're thinking, this is going to be a very typical ministerial level briefing meeting, lots of policy people. It was just the minister and his chief of staff. And what he wanted to know was talk me through the human being going through this experience. And that minister had a concept called the long screwdriver. And that was the ability to get past the divide between the executive branch of government and the elected branch of government to A, build a better relationship, but B, get involved. So that same minister would randomly appear in project control groups. And you can imagine what kind of rumours and conversations that started within organisations when a minister would randomly show up into a project control group and just start asking questions. What's our purpose? What's our intent? What are we trying to deliver, and what's the outcome? And over time, we saw that culture change. People felt more empowered. They actually felt proud that the person who would be in front of the public to advocate the things we were building would be hands-on. And it was more than a hackathon. It was more than just a one-off event. This became part of the DNA of delivery. And you started to see that culture change. Now, there are critics of that approach, feeling that elected branch leans in too far if you take that path. But it did deliver a lot of outcomes. And I think the other 2 things that were quite interesting that I've observed, in private sector, we're quite good. When we find an innovative C-suite leader, we empower them with really clear KPIs, and we keep their team small to allow them to be executive individual contributors. Governments around the world have a history of bringing great individual executive leaders and then giving them giant headcounts, which adds more bureaucracy, more people to manage, bigger budgets, other responsibilities, and distract away from that core purpose. You know, we're seeing that change, but where I come from in Australia, every agency will have to have a chief AI officer basically by the end of this month. And then that AI officer appointed will be responsible for an AI strategy at every agency level. Now, the challenge will be not putting that chief AI officer under a remit of responsibility for all ICT. How do you free up that type of talent to actually focus on strategy and delivery? And the last one is where we do a lot of work with Qualtrics around the world. You know, I work very heavily with governments where we provide whole of government employee engagement, civil service engagement, and even things like unsolicited feedback. But getting a torch to where all the skeletons are. And what I mean by that is, I was just working with the government at a roundtable on their digital strategy. And I'm reading through the strategy as a former public servant, and the thing that always stands out is everything in there is spot on about what needs to happen in the next 5 years. But the problem is, every single barrier is not articulated in there. And what I mean by that is, the barriers to innovation and the blockers exist in your steering committees. They exist in your meeting notes. They exist in policies with 1 or 2 sentences in those policies that block innovation from happening. But also the conversation about changing that dies project to project. So creating systems where people are ruthless in going in and finding where are old legacy policies, where are legacy regulations that are blocking innovation, and not necessarily changing all of them, because that's a very dangerous path, but actually going back to say we have a universal view of commonalities where policy is blocked, 3 paths to innovation in a program, different programs across different agencies in government. Now we have the evidence to go and review why that policy exists or why that level of bureaucracy exists. I think what we've become good at is seeing the North Star, but not democratizing the path to it. So the more we use data to understand policy blockers, barriers, this will allow people to take more risks, feel more confident to take them. And it will also empower policy leaders to think differently. 3-year evaluation cycles are too slow in a current world. How do we treat policy like our minimum viable products in digital government? And are we ready as nations to do that?
Thank you very much. I want to make sure that we're going to have an opportunity to get some questions from the floor. But I'll ask one more question from our panelists, and then maybe give you an opportunity to think of a few questions and come up. So we've talked a lot about leaders. We've talked a lot about employees wanting specifically to get involved and seeing the benefits. You've all led important data or digital transformations. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the biggest barriers and maybe sort of perhaps leaning on how to unblock or unlock some of these? So maybe I'll start with you, Amina, just from the perspective of in Uganda.
One of the biggest barriers we have is talent. The right talent to do the job. I think we've just heard that, countries have strategies. We do have, Uganda is one of those countries that has very good strategies in our region that our neighbors even borrow and use as is and succeed. But because we lack some of the talent that is required to implement these strategies, we face a problem. But we are currently trying to do a lot of reskilling programs, professionalizing the ICT cadre so that they can be able to walk the journey with us. The other barrier is the leadership. I think I'm just reversing whatever he's saying a bit, but the leadership in terms of the difference between the executive and the legislator, because the legislator are largely politicians, and for this I'm not really saying I'm saying this because I'm here, but this is a fact. Sometimes some of the discussions are politicized as opposed to being objective. And then that becomes a problem because we now start balancing the wheel between objectivity and popularity. The other barrier we have is, we have very good laws in terms of the enabling environment for digital transformation, but the enforcement also becomes a problem. And then when it comes to transparency, speaking about, because government, for anybody to appreciate digital transformation, the government has to come out and speak or demonstrate what it is doing. But when it comes to speaking, if you want ministers, if you want permanent secretaries to talk about the government programs, some of them are shy to talk about this. They're shy to go to the media because we have had dynamics in communication. We now have social media, social media or digital communication that is mainly attracted or pulls young people, and many of the people in government are a bit elderly. So balancing the gap between the young and the old, or communicating what the young people understand, becomes a problem. And that therefore also affects the culture of transformation. Because, for example, today, if we are talking about artificial intelligence, coming up with policies for artificial intelligence, if government is coming up with these policies, they should understand the young people. What do they want? What will serve them better? How will we bring services that are friendly to them? If we don't bring ourselves down to that level, it becomes a problem, and that is what we are struggling with a bit. But to kind of address these barriers in terms of communication, as a Ministry of ICT, because we know people have moved away from traditional media, from the newspapers and television. The young people watch podcasts and all this, or webinars. So we have come up with a government podcast. It's called the Ugandan Podcast, where we speak to the young people about this, but also to cater for the older generation, people who are still interested in the traditional conversation. We have come up with a program on one of our national broadcasters where we have the minister and the permanent secretary talk about what they are doing. So this makes government accountable to the people. So before you go to talk to the people, you had better do what you have to do. So that kind of culture is going to make people do their work and serve the government better. But also, yes, the other barrier is the bureaucracy, definitely. The red tape. you not being able to effectively implement agility. If you were able to, like in my ministry, we have tried to do that a little bit, but then you find that Office of the Auditor General, who at the end of the day is supposed to audit your processes, is going to hold you accountable for having done the process wrong. So if we put processes in place and policies, they had better be respected or implemented or people educated. I think the different parties, finance, taxes, auditors should be educated to appreciate digital transformation. Otherwise, we'll not be able to, to walk the journey or to walk the talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amina. Alex, when your first intervention, when you introduced yourself, you set the context up very closely. Again, from your perspective on barriers and some of those blocking things, you made a reference to a few little things, but just over to you for some thoughts on that.
Okay, I'm gonna do the exercise again. If you're from Ottawa, can you lift your hand up, please? No, there was way more people that put it up the first time. Now don't be embarrassed, it's okay. Anybody who put their hand up, you are the blockers. And I mean that respectfully. I am part of the problem as well. Like, if only we knew the people that control the outcomes of the government, oh geez, and that supported it. It's all of us. So what I mean by that is, like, we keep buying the same way, we keep hiring the same way, we keep overseeing the same way, and we expect a different result, right? So, like, to me, if we don't address how we do our work and expect a different outcome, right? The stuff that gets us in trouble is the operational stuff, because we keep doing the same things over and over again. I remember a conversation with Walt Natichuk, who was at Veterans Affairs Canada at the time. They had done the best digital project I think I've ever seen for their veterans. And I asked him, and I was like, what was the key? And he was like, we're in Charlottetown. Like, we're far from Ottawa. We're away from the eyes. We're, the eye of Sauron kind of thing, for those of you that are geeks. We're away from how we do things in Ottawa. And I thought that was shocking. And it just brings it back to culture. I think our culture is the problem. It's not that we have a toxic, negative, I'm not saying any of that. Please don't go on social media. That's not what I'm saying. But our culture is a problem when it comes to delivery. Phoenix is not a pay problem. Phoenix is a culture problem. And I'm the one that has my hands in this muck day in and day out, and I can tell you that's true, right? We all think we're different snowflakes in our departments. We all need different things at the cost of not paying people, right? It's a problem. We have to talk about it. We have to be able to have a safe space to talk about it. We have to be able to have a conversation around the fact that the processes I was alluding to earlier create catastrophic failures. Because if you ask me for 9 years of costing, I'm going to ask you if you're asking me to lie to you, because that's what I'm going to have to do. Because 9 years ago, we had an iPhone 2. And now you're asking me what pay is going to look like in 9 years. We have normalized our pay issues for the last 8. So ask me what 9 looks like. We're lying, and we have to stop the lying. So we have to question ourselves on how we set up delivery. And so for me, the barrier to get away from it is easy. I only want us to hire in human capital management and pay people that have the courage to be different, really different. Okay? Because to say you're different and you're doing theater is not acceptable. To say you're different and you're not going to challenge status quo is not acceptable, right? So, like, make sure that, you're okay speaking your truth. Make sure that you're comfortable reporting red even when people tell you it's not red. Make sure that you're not doing transformation theater, right? Which is like, oh yeah, we've done, first of all, transformation is a word we shouldn't use because it implies an end state, and I don't think we're ever done, but anyways, make sure that, you're bringing people into the tent. With human capital management, I think we're now the most transparent project potentially in the history of government. Every 3 months, we release all our documents to the public now. Bring it. Let's go. Because I don't fear us failing, because we're pushing back on all of the things that create the failure. We're saying no to 9 years of costing, and guess what? We got a policy exemption. So just go have a conversation with Treasury Board Secretariat. They're not mean people. I used to work there, right? Well, maybe they're nicer now. But anyways, so go have that conversation with them. We release most of our documents to the public. We are in front of the media every 3 months to report on failures and our successes, because we can't hide behind the fact this hasn't been a success. This is one of the, if not the biggest leadership failure in the history of public sector in Canada, right? So in order to get over the blockers, we're also, sadly, we kind of have that opportunity in our hands. But it is exhausting to challenge the status quo. And then when you do, you get nicknames like dictator in chief, which is, I hate it because it's like, I'm just trying to do the thing different. Sorry to, disruptor, whoa, Freudian slip. Disruptor in chief. But like, you know, you're not disrupting, you're just trying to do the thing different, right? So I guess my plea to all of you in the room is to actually just be different, right? And accept the differences. Don't talk like me, don't act like us. Don't try to be a DM of policy, just be yourself. And challenge the status quo day in and day out. It will be exhausting, but it will be extremely rewarding. And I think so far in the last year, we've been able to do some things on the pay side, like introduce AI into the backlog, launching in January. You can go check out your new pay and HR system, by the way. It's being demoed next, I think. So go have a look there. Like, we're building the thing. We're not asking for forgiveness, and we're not asking for permission. So to me, like, it gets back to the soft stuff around culture.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of those comments are going to resonate with our audience members today. Alexandra, back to you again, a little bit about those sort of barriers, or if you want, maybe even keys to success or barriers or other things that you've seen in your department in Germany.
Yeah, some barriers. I think we already talked about leadership, so I totally agree with Amina on this part. But there are also other barriers. One barrier is the current structure of organizations. We can only change a small part of culture if we don't change the structure. We have to change structure. And the other barrier is this understanding. Why should we change and how should we change? Why is something that leaders have to communicate. Why is it necessary to change our mindset, to change our ways to work? And the how is how can we teach people to change, to work different? And we have different approaches to this area. Small approaches, we have established an innovation lab in our ministry so that people can work in a design thinking approach on their problems to find new ways to work. We have programs of an exchange of experts from companies, from federal-owned companies into the ministries, or from digital experts into the ministries, so that our people can learn how to work differently. We have established a change management manual so that we can very good encourage people to go into a change process, to ask themselves how can we change our processes and to help people to adapt to these changes. I think this is very important. And one thing, it's not a barrier, but it's something I want to mention, is that the time is very important. First of all, change needs time, but it needs time for different persons differently. Different persons have different skills to work with change or to learn new ways, and you have to recognize the different needs of people to adapt to changes, and that is very important. And the last thing is, I think the commitment is necessary for cultural change, the commitment of the leaders who have encouraged their staff to take risks, and if a risk is taken and there is a failure, then the leaders have to back their people and not to say, okay, that is wrong, this is a failure. That is what I mean with commitment. Commitment to say we want to go another way, we want to change, we want another mindset, and then we need leaders who back their people when there is a problem and the risk is, so we have a problem there. And these are some of the things. And on the federal level, we have also some programs federal government has founded, I think 3 years ago, the Digital Service Company. That is a company that is responsible for digital projects, is responsible for an exchange of experts into the ministries. And we have also founded a platform, the GovTech Campus, where the scientific community, federal level, and companies work together in projects. And so we can learn from each other and develop projects very fast and not with all these bureaucratic time and processes you need, but more fast. And so there are some things you can do, but I think time is really important. You need to know that cultural change needs time and that you need to work constantly to encourage, to help people to adapt to this change, and it's not an easy way.
Thank you very much for that. Erica, just to mix it up a bit, we talk about challenging the status quo, empowering employees, not to be afraid to fail. I know IRCC has done a lot of transformation. How do those things how do you react to some of those, and how is it dealt with at IRCC from a leadership perspective?
I think, first of all, we have to recognize with a very highly operational organization, there are certain failures we can't afford, but in order to get to that elimination of catastrophic failure, we have to be comfortable with smaller failures faster. So I tell my team that, I'd rather see you fail something in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days than it is in 60 days. If we haven't failed enough in the first iteration of a mini project, let's say, we're not doing the right things. And I think that's, from what I've seen, this type of digital transformation that's currently undergoing at IRCC, exactly the kind of culture, it's the right culture to incubate the right empowerment atmosphere for our employees. And the second thing, I'll say is we have a tendency as an organization to kind of make decision by consensus. And if you do that, you're not doing anything. There is not, I haven't encountered in my career, like there's one instance when you can get 100% agreement on everything. If you do, you need to take a good look at the group of people that are saying yes, because they're probably not the right people. So I really think part of what we're doing right is we have an executive team that's reflective of diversity, that we have younger generations and we have women, we have people from different ethnic communities. We truly reflect that kind of different perspective voices at every step of the way before we say, yeah, you know what, this is something we can afford to fail versus this is something we can't. So in that respect, we are actually, I think we're really on a very right track, and I'm quite optimistic about the future. I'll stop there.
No, that's super, super great. Philip, from your perspective, again, I know a little bit different. I noticed you shaking your head quite a bit in agreement with what Erica was saying with regards to decisions by consensus and other things like that, but a little bit from your perspective.
Absolutely. It's, I don't miss those days of having everything go by a committee to get an approval. And it is something different in the private sector because you honestly have a core metric. And if your business case stacks up against it, then that's the decision. But I think, very interestingly, what I've seen a lot across the world and what we're seeing a lot as well is there has to also be a shift at the highest level of government, which is who's the COO for a prime minister? And what I mean by that is traditionally, if you think about the trinity of leadership, there's the chief executive, the CEO, the COO, and then the chief financial officer. Now, government's very good at having a CEO and a treasurer make a lot of decisions. So the CFO and the CEO component are covered, but that COO role often gets left to whatever the most popular ministry is. and it is, to Amanda's point before, it's a popularity challenge as well. So how do we create the disciplines where that perspective of a COO across government and across treasuries and across budgets exists, and where governments don't have a choice but to foundationally see digital capability as an infrastructure rather than just programmatic programs across different agencies. We're seeing the birth at Canada's, on that path with digital services. We see the rise of these national agencies, but then those national agencies end up becoming underfunded or begging for funding over time. So there's a systemic shift that has to happen. Now that also has to happen with accountability. You can't just be funding into digital transformation without clear transparency into the outcomes that's delivering for citizens in a nation. But if we look at the changes in the world, that's not going to be a choice much longer. With the rapid evolution of technology, governments will have to speed up investment and accountability to catch up. And I think we're starting to see some of those changes occur. There's still a long way to go. And I think, when we start to think about those barriers, empowerment's really important. The ability, and not all nations have this problem, but to embrace state capacity into national leadership for transformation in government, to bring talent through. Talent, I know, has been mentioned already, and I'm proud that my career in government's put me in the place I am today, and it's something that I'll always eternally be proud of, and we need to build a culture where more people are proud of being in the public service workforce. But actually it becomes an advantage, and it becomes a disadvantage in some ways. I remember we were losing engineers to private sector. Where I'm from in Sydney, Atlassian is next door, so that's a challenge when you have good engineers. But to see the journey of a public servant move into a career that allowed them to go and take a senior role in a private tech company, that's a success that we don't talk about a lot. There's a generation of talent coming through the public service that we need to celebrate to inspire more young people to be involved and contribute. We also need to show the public that their voice makes a difference, and it's more than just opinion polls, that they can actively participate, they can learn how government operates, they can have a say more than just kind of talking to the media or saying, talking about the ministerial branches of government, for example. How do you have a say in an agency? And I think, I've got to talk about successes. We've seen some really good successes where people have taken those risks that should be talked about more. There's a very little nation next to us in Australia, but if you talk rugby, they'll tell you they're much bigger, which is New Zealand. I've seen an example of work in New Zealand I haven't seen anywhere else in the world, and it was a team of 5 people. They've built a program where they're getting feedback from at-risk 12 to 15-year-olds in foster care. And they've built the entire program with behavioural psychologists, child psychologists, and graphic designers. And they've eliminated the layers of communication where the feedback from that child is already implicating into policy for a senior official. So think about the voice of a 12-year-old child in foster care who's at risk through technology is now empowered to the point that they're generating insights to a senior official to change policy for childcare in a nation. That's the type of innovation we've got to talk about more and talk about it being simple. I think one thing I've noticed outside of government is when we talk about technology and innovation, we have a tendency to try and turn everything into rocket science. And then simplicity almost sounds too good to be true sometimes. The pandemic's a great example of where a lot of barriers were removed during the pandemic, but we're starting to go back to bring those barriers back in again without questioning why we were able to deliver without them in the first place. So I think there's a long way to go, but there's a lot of successes out there now as well.